Greetings, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the Charlotte New Music Festival online. And here we have Band Frequency, um, contemporary ensemble based in Atlanta. And, well, now they're based in Atlanta and LA. Pretty fancy. And, but they are also a nonprofit organization. They do a lot of performing. I'm going to let them speak, though. They also do a lot of community present work, which is super cool that I want you guys to hear about as well. But they are going to do a really nice presentation, so I'm going to hand it over to Jen and Stuart.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, as Elizabeth said, we are Ben Frequency, and Stuart and I are the Ben Frequency duo. We are the co-artistic directors of the ensemble. So my name is Jan Berry Baker, and I am currently in Los Angeles. I'm in my office at UCLA, and Stuart and I have been working together on Ben Frequency since 2009, but the group itself has been operating since 2003. Stuart is the remaining founding member, and I'll let him take things from here at this point.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Stuart Gerber. I'm a percussionist, and I'm a professor of music at Georgia State University in Atlanta. I started Ben Frequency in 2003, probably before most of you were born. And after moving to Atlanta and seeing there wasn't too much new music happening, I was one of the founding members of this group. So what we're going to talk about today, we have kind of two sections we're going to talk about. I'm going to give a little bit of overview of the kinds of work we've been doing, programmatically primarily, although we commission a lot too, but we're talking, some of the commissioning falls into the programmatic work, but it's more just programming and the things we're interested in, and how we kind of fit into the larger artistic community of Atlanta, which also then helps us garner some, funding opportunities. So, and then the second part of the talk, Jan is going to talk more about running a nonprofit organization, the grant component, the finding money, doing this kind of thing that might be beneficial to some of you going forward. For the first half, Jan's going to be manning the chat. If there are questions, you should ask them, and then we'll kind of switch roles. So I'm going to go ahead and share. I have a keynote presentation. Hopefully everything works well. Can you all see that? Can I give okay. So this is just our presentation. Like I said, we've been around since 2003. So the history, basically what I'm going to be talking about today are kind of 4 subsections. Community partnerships, and what I mean by that is largely other arts organizations, but not just other arts organizations, but partnering with other groups, nonprofit, otherwise. Socially engaged programming, community engaged programming. So when the actual programs we do involve audience and community members in the sound production, but also maybe immersive components, things like this. And then the whole goal, or the whole reason for going over those 3 things, is to talk about our general season programming, which the last few years we've kind of reached a nice place with that, I think. But all of these 3 other components, the partnerships, the socially and community engaged programming, all kind of feed into the general season programming we do now, and kind of culminate in what we've been doing for the last few years. Now, some of the things I'm going to talk about, some of the programs kind of traverse these 3 different areas. It's not like there's one program is only community partnerships and so forth. I'm just going to give you an example of some of the things we do. This is not all the programs, but I also feel like I might have put too much in this presentation, so we'll see. I'm going to try to do this in about 20-ish minutes or so. But again, if there's questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and Jan will try to get my attention. Okay, so community partnerships. We've done a number of these. 2 that kind of come to mind, and basically, I want to say this too. A lot of this stuff is more of the recent past. Even though we've been around since 2003, most of the things I will be discussing today only go back to about maybe 2012, 2013. It's not that we weren't doing much before that. We were doing just kind of concerts, But I think we really started finding more of an identity and a vision and like kind of a purpose within the greater Atlanta arts community and farther, not just Atlanta, but around 2011, 12, something like that, kind of when Jan joined. So that's kind of, we'll be focusing on that now. So Core Dance is a dance company based in Decatur, Georgia, it butts up against Atlanta. And they've been around since, I think, the 80s, a really great modern dance company. And so we've done a few projects with them and found that it was really great, not just artistically, but also as an audience builder. The more you can partner with other kinds of groups, you'll glean some of their audience and vice versa, so you'll kind of cross-pollinate as it were for audience development. And so we've done some projects at the Callan-Wald Fine Arts Center, so another kind of collaborative thing where we collaborate with a venue. And we did 2 projects with Core there, and it's interesting, they were both for Valentine's Day, so Secret and On Love. And if someone were to say to me, what kind of music would you think you hear on Valentine's Day, it's typically not maybe avant-garde new music like we tend to play, but we really worked with Core on making a program that was engaging and thoughtful, but that was a contemporary dance and music program both times, and that was a really fun but arduous process. I mean, we went to a lot of the Core rehearsals as they were preparing the dance, and we gave them ideas on pieces and repertoire, and we went from there. And it took a number of weeks to kind of hone, but it was both examples were great. And then the High Museum in Atlanta is kind of the large juggernaut museum of Atlanta, great collection, and we've done 2 other projects with Core at the High Museum as well. So again, this kind of collaborating both with a dance ensemble and a venue or a museum. So this last one, 2016, the project was Experiment, Question, and Refine. And this was actually a collaboration with Core based on this exhibit, Iris Van Transforming Fashion exhibit that the High did. And so I have a little clip, if it behaves. Oh, sorry. First of all, these are a couple of photos just from On Love. You can kind of see it. The Callan-Wald Fine Arts Center is this really great old mansion. And I think it wasn't it Woodruff's mansion, Jan? The founder of Coke? I should know. Anyway, we did it kind of in this house, and just a couple of photos. And then this is the project at the High, and this is just like a 1-minute trailer if it behaves. Just to get a little flavor of that. What's interesting about that collaboration was, so some of the collaborations we did with Core was us finding music to fit a certain thing. That was just Jan and I, just the 2 of us, just improvising. I mean, we composed the pieces in collaboration with Core over time, but that as formally. And as far as, okay, we're doing this for about 5 minutes, but the actual musical stuff within that time was largely improvised based on some ideas. So that was a really rewarding experience to actually, create the music as well. We've done a number of partnerships with governmental agencies, developing programs that fit within a specific call. Like we have Fulton County Arts Council, Georgia Council for the Arts, and then this was Atlanta Beltline. If you're not familiar with, it's a Rails to Trails project around the city of Atlanta. It's like, I think, a 28-mile loop of an old railroad that they are slowly they're converting it into a multi-use trail, bicycling, rollerblading, things like that. And it's they have about half of it done now, and it's really transforming a lot of the neighborhoods around Atlanta. But they have Art on the Beltline series, and so they do these calls every year for artists. Usually, or majority, are probably visual artists, sculpture, murals, things like that. But they also have performances on the Beltline. So we've done a couple of projects there through Art on the Beltline, and then so I have a little clip from that. And then we have this Elevate Atlanta, which is also an ongoing festival that we developed a couple of projects for as well. But let me talk about Art on the Beltline. So in 2015, we did a project called A Bicycle Built for 111. Maybe you've heard The Bicycle Built for Two, that old-timey song. I don't even know who wrote that. But Maurizio Kagel, why don't I have... Oh, did I not put that in here? Oh, I didn't put it in. Hold on a second. Holy cow. I thought I totally added that. Give me a second. Sorry about this. Why did that not go in there? Huh. That's funny. Maybe I didn't save it. Okay. So I'm going to add something here. Maurizio Kagel. Can you all still hear me okay? Okay. Maurizio Kagel, German Argentinian composer, passed away a few years ago. Hopefully you are aware of his work. He did a piece called Eine Brise or A Breeze for 111 cyclists. It's a very short piece, but it sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. Let's do this. Okay, let's see if this works. Oh, I see.
You want me to share it, Stuart, the video?
No, not yet. Sorry, okay. I'm almost there. So he, this Eine Brise is for 111 cyclists, and at different points in the piece, they ring bells, sing at some point, and do all this other stuff. And so we organized a performance of that for this Art on the Beltline project, because the Beltline. Let me try this again. Let me reshare here. Sorry about that. Because the Beltline is such a cycling kind of centric thing. So we decided to do a whole program around bicycling with the Kagel's Eine Brise as kind of a centerpiece. So are you guys seeing that again? Okay, let me go back to play mode. Let's see if we can't get this going. Okay, gives you a little taste of the piece, the start of the piece. And just, it's kind of a silly little piece. It only lasts like a minute or two. But then we also did another piece that by the German percussionist composer Matthias Kaul, who just passed away not too long ago, this year, unfortunately. But he did a piece called Wheeled. And I'm going to quickly add this. Sorry, I totally planned to add these. And for 5 people actually playing bicycles. So this is a little snippet of that. Can you hear this? So just a little snippet. I mean, the piece is, a lot longer than that. But again, we wanted to do this partnership, this call for scores, or just call for art on the Beltline, and we thought a bicycle-themed thing was interesting. Also, one of the players in there, a guy named multimedia artist named Klimchak. He was the center bicycle. He also wrote a piece for Jan and I to perform with him, and he played a theremin bicycle. He hooked up his theremin to his handlebars and played that. So it was kind of an interesting program for that around from that component. Other thing we've done in the past that's kind of an ongoing thing is we've partnered with the Confucius Institute at Georgia State and also at Emory University for a Happy Chinese New Year project. So we do around the Lunar New Year every year, we do a program that highlights composers of Chinese heritage, oftentimes juxtaposed with Chinese traditional music. So we've had composers like Lei Liang, Xi Wang on campus, and also we helped to bring the Zhao family band to campus last year, right before the pandemic. Actually, in January was our last one of those. So this is a picture of the Zhao family band playing, but just to show that trying to find partners within the community for specific programs. And obviously most of you are composers, but you might end up running ensembles, things like that. But this is kind of we found the best way to kind of fund what we want to do is to try to find partnerships with different organizations, different agencies, things like that. We also have donors who contribute, and Jan will talk a little bit about just the whole 501c3 situation, but the majority of our funding comes from grants. And to get grants, you need interesting ideas. You can't just say, I want to do a concert. It has to have some kind of connection to the community, some kind of connection to something kind of specific, typically. We also, I won't show this clip, but Carolyn Chen, we did, again, in January, she has this great film piece with film called Made in China, Made in California, that kind of explores her growing up as a Chinese American living in California, so the film interviews Chinese residents and then also U.S. people and about their conceptions and misconceptions about the other culture. I think I'll just keep moving on for time. So the next kind of section I'm going to hit is socially engaged programming. So again, the Chinese New Year kind of falls under this category because we have a large Chinese population in Atlanta. So we felt like there was a nice programming thing to do to bring some new music, of composers of Chinese heritage to the city. Also, we started doing this piece called The Innocence, which explores wrongful conviction and horrible situations in the U.S. penal system. We've done a number of we've done two large operas of Mexican composers and also a festival of contemporary Mexican music because we have a large Latinx population in the Atlanta area. Disarm is a really cool project. I have some photos of these as we go, but this is just kind of outlining them. Let me go just for time. Love, We Resist, and then some season programming. So The Innocence, as I said, wrongful convictions and inhumane conditions in the U.S. penal system. So for this one, we partnered with, we've done it a few times. These percussionist composers, Alan Oddie and John Lane, wrote a piece called The Innocence based on basically some art that they saw by Terrence Simon, who was influenced by the Innocence Project. So this national project that looks to exonerate people who are, put in prison wrongly convicted. And so Terrence Simon took some of these wrongly convicted individuals and kind of recreated the scene of their supposed crime and took photos of them. And it's a quite moving exhibition. So John and Al created a half of a program piece called The Innocence, and then we coupled those with Frederick Rzewski's Coming Together and Attica, which are quite moving kind of political works as well. Maybe you're familiar with those. Here's a little clip. So we've done this a few times. For this clip here, we actually partnered with the University of Georgia College of Law and School of Music, and we had a 3-day residency all kind of based around this topic. If you don't know the Rzewski, I'll just play a little clip of us playing this work.
I think the combination of age and a greater coming together is responsible for the speed of the passing time. I think
Oh, sorry. Shoot.
the passing time. It's 6 months now, and I can tell you, truthfully, few periods in my life have passed so quickly. I think the combination of age and a greater coming together is responsible for the speed of the passing time.
I'll cut it off before it gets a close-up of me. So that work is, the text is from Samuel Melville, who was an inmate at Attica prison, and wrote this letter to his brother, and he actually died in the Attica prison riots in 1971. So it's pretty, and the riot started because of inhumane conditions that the prisoners had to endure. So it's a moving piece, and it kind of fits well with that program. I mentioned some of these other composers' projects we've done. Ricardo Zohn-Muldoon teaches at Eastman, and he has this piece called Comala, which is, he calls it a scenic cantata. It's not, I don't know, we call it more of a chamber opera. I guess scenic cantata is more correct. And then, so we've done that piece a couple times, both in the U.S., both in Atlanta and also in Mexico. And then Juan Trigos, DeCachetitoRaspado, Cheek to Stubbled Cheek, and then a new music festival that showcased music from composers of Mexican heritage. Here's some pictures of the DeCachetitoRaspado that we did in Atlanta, chamber opera by Juan Trigos. And then I'll just give you a little clip of this piece, Comala, of Ricardo Zohn-Muldoon. This was recorded in Mexico, but we played it in Atlanta and other places as well. Let's see if it goes here.
Lo que pasa con estos métodos viejos es que cuando les llega la mitad comienzan a removerse.
Comala is one of the most powerful scores that has been written in Mexico in the last few decades.
Está basada en Pedro Páramo de Juan Rulfo, que es un libro que leí pues hace muchísimos años.
A character going back to his hometown to pay his respects to his mother, and he discovers all sorts of strange things about his past.
Comala is the story of Juan Preciado. I play Juan, and his discovery of his father, Pedro Páramo.
So that piece is based on Pedro Páramo, a book by Juan Rulfo, which is very well known in Mexico, and so it resonates really well with Mexican audiences and in Mexico. This next project we don't have any recordings of, unfortunately, but it's called Disarm, and we partnered with a Flux Night, which is an organization in what's just called Flux, and then they do a Flux Night, an arts organization in Atlanta. And so Pedro Reyes is an artist, a Mexican artist, who took these all these confiscated guns that the Mexican government confiscated from cartels and whatever, and made instruments out of them. So we played 5 concerts in this one night based using these instruments. So you can kind of see some photos here. Yeah, I guess I just have the 3 here, but like kind of a violin and a guitar kind of thing, although we're playing them as percussion instruments. But there's these pistols here. You hit them and then submerge them in the water, and they kind of make this interesting sound. So really amazing concept by Reyes, and then we tried to bring kind of music to life on it, on these instruments. In November 2016, kind of right after the presidential election, we did this program with Love We Resist, kind of trying to show that, trying to use music as a way to get past all the nasty rhetoric that was happening at the time. Well, maybe still is happening. That was one other just kind of socially conscious idea. And here's some photos from that. There's Jan with a wonderful Trump impersonator. Yeah, just moving on. So then community-oriented programs. I've already talked about a little bit of this as well, but trying to find pieces that involve the community maybe more directly, either in sound making or kind of with an immersive, experience, or even just presenting music somewhere that's you wouldn't expect. So I already talked about Bicycle Built for 111. Music for a captive audience. Let's see. I already talked. Oh, here's where I added them. Well, that was dumb. Anyway, I already showed you this. We'll move on. I knew I added them. All right. This is what I get for doing this late at night. Then we did a project with Elevate Atlanta, which is, I mentioned them earlier, and this is an annual festival to highlight the arts in Atlanta. So usually about a week or 10 days long, and we've done a couple of projects. This one was, we had this new, well, maybe not so new now, but in 2015, a brand new streetcar in Atlanta. And so we decided, we did a program, Music for a Captive Audience, meaning the people inside the streetcar. We're just going to kind of do these concerts, whether they like it or not. A couple photos here, but we had we did, I think it was 14 concerts in 7 days. I think we did 2 a day, and they were about 40 minutes long, because that's about how long the streetcar takes to go around the city. And we just largely improvised, but we had someone playing a toy piano. Actually, Adam Scott Neal, who had association with Charlotte New Music Festival for a long time, he played some toy piano on here and all kinds of stuff. But then you see Jan doing some weird stuff with stainless steel bowls. I don't think that was actually music. I think that was just what she does. As a joke. All right, moving on. And then another interesting project we did for Elevate was, so part one in 2016, Elevate wanted to focus on just like immediately south of downtown Atlanta, which was kind of, not maybe the best part of town historically, and they're trying to use art to kind of bring some attention to it, and now it's actually is being developed like crazy, which has its own issues. But we did a piece called A Wave and Waves by Michael Pizarro, who teaches at Cal Arts. And this is for 100 percussionists. Now, you don't have to be a percussionist to play it, and most of these weren't, but we got 100 of our community members together and played this piece in a old parking garage on the south side of Atlanta. It's an hour-long piece, and it was quite an amazing experience. It's just a video gives you this picture shows just a little bit of the setup and the enormity of the work, but it's all very delicate because it's all what he calls gravity percussion, or most of it is, which is just like dropping rice or pebbles or small little objects on various percussion instruments. Like you can see here, I think there's a bunch of rice on that bass drum that was collected. So it's just like all these really delicate sounds, but there's 100 people doing it, so it's quite an experience orally. And the audience was both the performers, but there were also audience members who weren't performing, just interspersed within the performers. So it was a really great event, and again, part of this kind of audience-inspired programming. And then we brought John Luther Adams to town, and we did his Sela, The Breath of the World, which is for 80 musicians, and we did it outside. This piece has, John's work has been influenced by climate change and things like that. He, probably know he lived in he's known as kind of the Alaska composer. He's done a number of outdoor pieces. Inuksawit is a percussion one for 9 to 99 percussionists. Sela, The Breath of the World, is for 80 players. So 16 percussion, 16 woodwinds, 16 brass, 16 strings, and 16 singers. And we mounted this in Woodruff Park in downtown Atlanta on a chilly-ish but nice April day in 17? Yeah. And then we also we did a project about Japanese gardens and the sonification of the Japanese gardens. So we did a famous piece of John Cage's called Ryoanji, in which he traced stones to create the score from Ryoanji, the Japanese garden. But also Toshio Hosokawa has a piece for Vertical Time Study 2, I think. Or 1 or 2, I should know, but for piano, saxophone, and percussion. But we brought Michael Fowler, who is a Berlin-based sound artist, who did a whole architectural mapping of a Japanese garden in Japan, and then created an electronic piece based on kind of the dimensions and the perspectives of the Japanese garden. And it was a 8-channel piece that he and I played kind of improvised parts with it. And we also did a really nice project called Otinawa, which involved all the audience members making sounds using rocks and pieces of bamboo. And we just did a sound piece with the audience. So just a different kind of concert, really. Or we tried to do something that would involve the audience a little bit more, but also with Fowler's electronic piece, kind of immerse them within an 8-channel setting. Some of you may know this piece, Unsilent Night. This is another community-based thing that we do almost annually. Well, started to. We first did it in 2003, and we brought Phil Klein in to do it. And back then, so this piece is, Phil Klein wrote this piece. It's like about 45 minutes. And there are 4, it's all electronic, and there are 4 different tracks. And back in the day, you were meant to play this as a community during the holiday season. It's not religious in nature, but just kind of festive in the sound world. And you kind of think of it like a 20th century or 21st century form of caroling. But rather than singing, everyone plays these tracks. Everyone has one of the 4 tracks, and you kind of start them more or less simultaneously. You play them initially on a boombox or some kind of portable stereo system, and you walk through the neighborhood or the city for 40 minutes and engage with the community. We started doing this again in 2017 and have done it annually, but now it's all on an app, and so it's all iPhones and Bluetooth speakers. Here's some photos of the procession. This was from we've done it in different locales around the city. This was in a historic West End neighborhood, and then here's a video of it, so you get a sense of kind of the sound world of this piece. So that recording was from a different part of town, a little town just south of Atlanta called historic Hapeville, all these historic areas. So basically, all that stuff I just talked about kind of led us to, other things as well. But since about 2018, we've kind of refocused our focus on programming. And we still do all of these things to some degree, but that also coupled with, we're the U.S. is in a time of reckoning right now with a number of issues, and one thing that classical music has just not been very open to various viewpoints of composers, and if you look at the programming of virtually all major orchestras and chamber groups, and it's all old dead white guys, mostly 95% or whatever. So we decided that we were going to try to, that bumper sticker, be the change you want to see in the world or whatever. We thought we would try to, the only thing, we can't control what the New York Phil plays or whatever, right? But we can control what we play. So in 2018-2019 season was just called Amplify, and 100% of the music we performed was composed by composers who from underrepresented communities in classical music. All right, so that means a lot of different things, but we tried to vary our programming, and we wanted to commit. So in Amplify that year, it was 100% of the programming. And ever since then, we've decided to continue the commitment with programming at least 80% of our music by composers from underrepresented communities in classical music. So that's been our goal. And there's so much wonderful music out there that there's plenty to highlight. And I should say this as someone, I worked with Stockhausen for a number of years, and and he's a German white guy, so there's great music out there by everyone, but we're trying to be a little bit more inclusive with our programming. Not even a little, we're committed to that. So that kind of started, with all these other things kind of coming together. And so since then, that's been our kind of mission. So for our Amplify season, we had Sarah Hennies come to Atlanta for a short residency. We did 2 concerts. The kind of marquee concert was this her piece Contralto, which is a video with score that kind of demonstrates and highlights the fact that trans women the voice that they have kind of doesn't mesh with who them living their own lives the way they want to, because the voice is deeper. And so it's a really fantastic film, and so we were able to screen that at the Plaza Theater, which is a historic theater, kind of a art house theater in Atlanta. And here's a trailer, this is just the general trailer for Contralto, but it's a really fantastic piece, and you can actually watch it on demand on Vimeo if you're interested, not with us playing, with a different group, but it's super moving and fantastic. So let me just play a bit of this. I forget how long it is, but yeah.
Sort of uneasy, and
I kind of tend not
Again, that was kind of that was a trailer for a different group's performance, but it's a fantastic piece, and that was kind of the marquee of Sarah's residency with us. Then other programs we did on that Amplify season, again, one of our Happy Chinese New Year concerts, and we brought Chi Wang in, and we did music of Chen Yi and Dorothy Chang and Ping Jin. The Ties That Stay On It, music by Jennifer Walshe, Uzra Netzer, Timothy Adams Jr., Dorothy Hindman, and Julius Eastman. And then for Anthem, we were able to bring George Lewis to town, which was fantastic. So we did a couple pieces of his, a piece by Alvin Singleton, Anahita Abbasi, Colette Coward, who is a Atlanta-based composer, Emily Coe, who's at University of Georgia, and Eve Biglarian. And of course, we did the Unsilent Night again. Love to Dr. Coe. I agree with that. She's fantastic. Just for time, I won't show you it's a 2-minute trailer just on some of the pieces we've done. I didn't time this talk out clearly. And then Re-Amplify, we've done some other programs that kind of fit this mold. And then, Re-Amplify that year was when we were canceled in that spring. But then we had sustained, we did virtual concerts this year, and we're always trying to do this, again, 80% of the programming to be, from composers from generally historically underrepresented communities in classical music. So, again, I have some videos, but I think for time I might just move ahead here. And next year, I think we titled our concert on Monday as Renew, but Renew is our season for next year, kind of coming out of the pandemic, renewing both our commitment to the bent frequency, to new music, to underrepresented communities, but also commissioning and renewing and renewing our kind of commitment, right? Because none of us have been able to kind of perform. So again, I went a little longer than I expected, so I apologize about that. But if there's any questions about any of this stuff, we'd love to hear them. Again, go ahead. Sorry, who's someone? Oh, that's Jan.
It was just me, sorry. I was just going to ask a question. If any of you, I know that you are all composers, but I assume that most of you also perform somewhat or have in the past, or if you're involved in working with an ensemble that you yourself run or that you're involved with. No composer performers here? Chase, you are.
Yeah. It's been hard.
For sure. I think we all want to get back to it, right?
Yeah, and some of our most interesting collaborations have been as a direct result of our work with composers, meaning that, it's not like we just find a piece and we program it. That's great. But some of our most valuable work has been really in tight collaboration with composers, which we really have enjoyed about Charlotte New Music Festival, working with our composers that we had the opportunity to do so with at this festival. But coming up with ideas and projects, because we like to think of them more than just concerts. It's not just putting on a concert, but rather creating a project. And so that has been really great for us as an ensemble. So I encourage you, even if you're not a composer performer, to really try to get involved from the development stage of a project with your performers. It's really such a valuable pursuit. So that's what I want to share with you a little bit about now, and I will go through mine quickly. And please do feel free to, interrupt with questions either in the chat. Stuart will alert my attention to those questions. But to show you a little bit how you can develop projects and how you go about fundraising for those projects, whether or not you're actually a 501. So Bent Frequency is a 501, which means that we have nonprofit status. We do a lot of educational activities that go along with our projects, and all of our stuff is driven by community input. So we have a board that we work with that represents people in our community, and we really take very seriously the audience feedback that we get, hence our commitment to community collaborations and such. Let me just share I see we already have a question. Perfect. Haley asks, might you cover this in your presentation? How do you go about approaching an organization you'd like to collaborate with, and how do you build genuine relationship with them? That is such a fantastic question, Haley. And I will be covering that, but it doesn't hurt to just talk about it a little bit right now too. Finding community partnerships is absolutely key to getting grant money from agencies in your community. That's what they look for. They want to know how you are going to benefit your community, what it is that the grant money will allow you to do as an artist to build your organization, but also what it will bring to the community and how it will help the community, not just from an artistic standpoint about bettering their lives from having enjoyed this, but, will it bring something different to them and bring upon change? And so we've had a number of these community partnerships where we have literally cold emailed somebody saying, okay, this may seem a little out of the blue, but we have this type of concert. So for instance, let's use the Sarah Henny's collaboration that we just talked about. So Sarah Henny's was coming to town. We're putting on contralto. And so we decided that we would do it at an old-fashioned theater in town, the Plaza Theater. Yeah, thanks. The Plaza Theater is a really cool old-time theater, has like an organ in it. They would start the shows that way and the curtain would come up. So we called to partner with them. And we then contacted Lost and Found Youth, which is an organization that is specifically devoted to helping teens and early 20 LGBTQ plus individuals when they are homeless. And so we decided we wanted to partner with them in some way during Pride Month to invite people who were part of Lost and Found to come for free to the collaboration, because we felt like the video was so powerful and so important that we wanted to make sure that we were not only sharing it with that community, but that they also felt like it was something that they were part of. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that correctly, but it wasn't just a surface partnership, that there was something deeper there. We also raised money. We do a lot of fundraiser things. So like when we did the Innocence Project, we raised money for the actual Georgia Innocence Project, which are a team of lawyers who work to get those wrongfully convicted off of death row. So those kinds of partnerships become more meaningful than just a surface partnership like, hi, can we use your facility? But more like, what can we do for the community for education purposes, or actually creating an ongoing relationship with these organizations? And I think that's the key, is finding ongoing relationships that you can sustain after the concert is over. So I hope that somewhat answers your question, and I'll kind of get to that as we discuss these things too. But let me share right now this PowerPoint that I pulled together.
Her PowerPoint looks way better than mine. Fair warning. That's okay. I'm okay with that.
Okay, can you all see that? Okay,
yes.
Thumbs up. Okay, so Grant Writing 101, and you may have taken a class like this, at your school. So I will not get too deep into this, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a start, because I do think it's so important as a performing organization to have composers be on your board, to have composers and performers working together to create, like I said, projects. And again, I like to think of these concerts that we create not just as concerts, but as projects, because there's art involved, there's multiple artistic sides actually taking part in creating what it is that we all do, from actually writing the music to making the artwork to, the dance, the music, the whatever it happens to be. And grant writing is a really great way to fund your projects. So it's an important skill for all of us to learn. So first of all, whether or not you're an individual or you're a group, I think it's really important to think about your mission and your vision. And this is what Stuart was talking about, that we've thought about this a lot. What exactly is our mission as a group and our vision? And those two things are a little bit different, and you'll be asked for those on your grant. So when you think about your mission, and you can brainstorm this really quickly by yourself, 10 minutes, what it is that you do, who it is that you do it for, the specific objectives of those things, of what it is that you do, and to be able to write that down without amplification, meaning it's really like 2 sentences, 3 sentences. It's not long descriptions. You're avoiding, going into real detail, but something super simple and clean that describes what you do, for who, and the specific objectives of that. Your vision then is where you kind of flush these things out, where you think about dreams and goals, purpose and values, and again, the desired legacy that you leave, meaning what will people remember your group for, what people remember your project for, if you're writing just a project grant. And remember that when you create your projects, your partnerships, your work with other artists, that everything you do needs to be measured and evaluated against your mission and vision. Because if those things don't jive, it's really hard to create something that will be lasting, or create something that will have the impact that you're looking for. So remember to always come back to that. We all go through those things, right? When we think about like, oh gosh, I really didn't feel good about that project or that concert, or I'm not so sure if what we're doing is right. If you always come back to measuring those activities and those plans against your mission and vision, you will be able to better self-guide yourself. So when you're creating a successful project, you can do this in so many ways. And I just threw out a couple of ideas here. That if you decide you want to pursue grant writing, these are some of the ways you can put together a successful project. You can think about bringing music to audiences in new and innovative ways. So we mentioned some of those, and Stuart mentioned some of those in his presentation. Bringing together creative artists from different fields. Again, Stuart mentioned how we've done that, whether it's partnering with puppeteers, whether it's partnering with a bicycle group, whether it's partnering with poets or visual artists. Many of those things can create really interesting and ways to tie into different audiences, right? To bring different people together to celebrate some kind of artistic project. You can look at teaching, you can look at technology, you can look at even listening to old music in new ways. It's not always about creating something entirely new, but of course, as composers, you're looking at creating something new. So you're thinking maybe about commissioning something new that brings together some of these things. But I think first and foremost for us, it's always thinking about how we engage with audiences and how we develop new audiences. That seems to be what drives us the most. All right. So as you're thinking about doing this, I talked about the mission and vision. You want to think about drawing up an artistic statement or a project proposal. And so taking it from a kernel of an idea to a proposal, you've got to think about writing what, where, when, how, and why. Those seem really simple as I post them right there, but when you don't actually think about writing those down, and I would write that down if I were you, or I can send this PowerPoint actually to Elizabeth and she can share. But try to keep those things in mind because it gets very overwhelming when they say, okay, what is your proposal? Create your narrative. And we forget what it is we're actually describing. Literally what, where, when, how, and why. And if you keep those 5 things in your mind, it makes creating that narrative a lot simpler, right? Because you can bullet point those things out and then flush it out in your proposal. And you really want to be sure that you then explain all the elements of your proposal, all those 5 things, to the fullest extent so that someone who's not a musician, not a composer, understands very clearly, without jargon, what it is you're doing. And it's really easy for us to slip into using jargon in proposals for grants. And we have to remember that not everyone is a musician or not everyone is a composer who is reading the grant. A lot of times they are artists working in the field, and sometimes they are just art lovers who live in the community. So when you say, I want to write a operetta for whatever, they don't even know what an operetta is. I mean, we take for granted terms that we just know and use all the time. So that's really an important point that I want to make is avoiding jargon.
Or a scenic cantata.
Scenic cantata, yes, of course. So thinking of a better way to describe what in the heck is a scenic cantata is important. And there are good proposals and there are bad proposals. The bad proposals are, rife with spelling mistakes, use a ton of jargon, are not concise and clear. But again, if you can stick with those 5 things, the what, where, when, how, and why in brief outlined form, and then flush them out, you will take your proposal to the good side rather than the bad side. Okay. So when you're beginning to look for how to raise funds, I can tell you that these 2 places are really great. Now, I don't live in New York and I never have, but the New York Foundation for the Arts has a very full listing of grant possibilities, as does Candid. And Candid used to be called, Stuart, what did Candid used to be called? It used to be...
It's not the Grant Station, is it?
Yeah, it was Grant Station, and now it's Candid. So these 2 places really are a great resource for anyone looking to write a grant. And they have grants for residencies and things. So this is not just a grant to put on a project, but this could very well be for commissioning fees for composers, can be for residencies, can be for all kinds of things. So I definitely recommend, and I will send this PowerPoint link to Elizabeth so it can be shared with everybody, because these have live links in them, and that way you have the links directly to these organizations. Okay, so if you decide that you're going to write grants and do so on a regular basis, I can tell you that you want to begin working on your grants well in advance of the deadline. Stuart and I are getting better at this, but it can get quite stressful at the 11th hour when all of a sudden the websites aren't working and you're missing a piece of what you need. But if you keep a grant calendar that allows you to see when things are due, you won't miss those important deadlines. And it allows you actually to gather your material so that you put forward the most professional looking application. Even if you're applying for, let's say, the Barlow commissioning project, there are things you have to gather and things that they will not take. Actually, it's not Barlow, it's Fromm. That you have to mail in. They actually won't take scores submitted via email or any kind of thing. You literally have to get a printed copy and mail it in. So you got to remember that, because all of a sudden, right, you're trying to find a FedEx at 11 p.m. so that you can mail in your hard copy so you don't miss the deadline. Okay, different kinds of grants that are available. There are governmental grants, foundation grants, and institutional grants. So institutional grants, of course, would be like applying for a grant from, say, University of Georgia, IACO. If you decide that you want to go to some conference and they have grants, you can apply for a grant as a graduate student, perhaps to go and attend some conference. If you're looking for a government grant, these are some of the governmental agencies worth checking out. So the National Endowment of the Arts is like the big overhead one, right? So you can apply for those grants. They also fund some of the grants that you would apply for at the lower governmental levels. So state arts councils, looking in the Connecticut State Arts Council is a really great place to start. Every state has an arts council and you can check to see what they have available. Then look at your county level. So if you live in LA County, you can look to see what grants the county offers. Then, of course, there's also city offices, and they're usually called the Office of Cultural Affairs in whatever city that you're in. So we always apply to the Atlanta Office of Cultural Affairs. But these 4 levels are the governmental agencies you can apply to. Foundations. This is another great place to apply. There are, I can tell you, less reporting regulations with foundations, so you'll find this to be less paperwork. Some of them can be a lot of money, and some of them can be less money than the governmental ones. But these are 5 examples. There are so many, I can't even begin to list them all for you, but I thought I would list a few that might be appropriate to the composers here. Barlow Commissioning Foundation, Amphion Foundation, Copeland Fund. These things all support new music, right, by those of us who are pursuing those kinds of projects. So qualifying for grants, who can apply? So we are a 501, but individuals can also apply for grants if they have a fiscal sponsor. And a fiscal sponsor, the most sort of known one is, oh my gosh, of course, I just lost it. Stuart, what's the name of the fiscal sponsor?
Fractured Atlas.
Fractured Atlas, thank you. Sorry, I should have actually put that on my own PowerPoint. Fractured Atlas is the most sort of common one. So a fiscal sponsor is a 501 that essentially allows you to write a grant under their umbrella. They take a little cut from whatever you get in the grant, but it allows you as an individual to apply for a grant that typically requires you to be a 501. Okay, so you can avoid doing that if you get a fiscal sponsor. You can also become a nonprofit if you have an organization or group that actually serves the community, and you're able to submit the paperwork for that. It is a little time consuming and can be expensive if you actually need to hire a lawyer to do so. You can do it yourself without a lawyer, but it's easier to do if you have some legal support. And every state has a Lawyers for the Arts. So you can get some advice and information from your state Lawyers for the Arts. So the Georgia Lawyers for the Arts, or the California Lawyers for the Arts. You can look it up, and they can assist.
And we actually had the Georgia, one of the Georgia Lawyers for the Arts actually just did our whole application for us very quickly. I mean, they're typically partners and firms have to do pro bono work, and a lot of them choose to do that pro bono work in this space.
So that can help. So if you have an organization, going, or partners that you're working with and want to put something together, you can certainly do that. Okay, so again, I wanted to share another little pro tip with you and tell you that sometimes we do apply for grants that are specific. Like Stuart mentioned, Art on the Beltline has a very specific mission, and so we would create things that we could apply for that grant for. But always be very careful that you don't alter your artistic goals just to apply for a grant, meaning that you're not compromising your values, your mission, your vision in order to fit into a grant. It's always best to be on the earnest side of those things and look for a grant that fits your project rather than the other way around. It doesn't mean that when you see Art on the Beltline, you can't create something that works for that. It just means being very careful not to omit something or to change something that really compromises your mission and your vision. It never ends well, and then you end up not, you won't be proud of the project in the end. So I wanted to share that with you. Okay, why you apply for a grant. Pros are obviously money, right? You can increase community engagement because you end up getting all kinds of community partnerships and meeting people, different artists. You increase your project impact because you have more funds, because you have made these community partnerships. And sometimes these grants themselves will allow you to leverage additional funding. Because they will look for matching grant opportunities, or a grant will say you must have funds from a foundation in order to receive our funds, or because you won some grant, now you're eligible for a next level type thing. The cons, and I can say you should think about this a lot, the cons are not insignificant. Grants are very time consuming. Sometimes you will feel like artistic compromises need to happen, and you have to be very careful about that. I can't say that enough times. I know I said that on the previous slide, but you cannot make artistic compromises. It's really critical to your ongoing success as an artist not to compromise those things. And the financial reporting, I'm sure that anyone who's ever written a grant can attest that the financial reporting after the fact is and can be extremely overwhelming and time consuming. So that time consuming thing kind of comes back on both ends of it, really. Okay, so I mentioned before the types of grants, governmental, foundation, and institutional. Then within those, you can look for both operational support and project support. And I imagine that most of you at this stage would be looking for project support rather than supporting your organization on an ongoing basis. But as you develop your projects, that's what you want to be thinking about, that mission and vision that I talked about, those 5 steps. And then being sure that you have really looked through the entire grant application to be sure that you meet all the criteria. And I can't reiterate that enough, because we've put in time, 20 hours of time, to get to the end to find out that, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Because of one thing in our organization, or I didn't realize that, that we had to be a 501 for 7 years. Oh, how this got all restarted. For 7 years, we're now no longer eligible for this project grant. So, oh my gosh, my whole thing just started over again. All right. So be sure to read all the way through. That is, stop sharing now, I hope. Okay. So questions and things that came up in the chat. No questions?
I don't see any. Does anyone have questions they want to type in there?
Lansing. Hey, Lansing.
This is so great, and I want a copy of your PowerPoint. This is really, really great. I was the president of, I was a member of Composers Red Sneakers for many years, and was the president for several years. And for those of you who don't know, Composers Red Sneakers was the first, before Bang in a Can, before any other, they were the first composer consortium in Boston. Started in like 1980. So when I joined, of course, it had already existed for decades. We went belly up when I was president after the last financial, the first financial crisis, 2008, etc., because all of our grants dried up and we relied 100% on grants. No grants meant we were dead. Also, we ran into legal problems with our 501 status. There are multiple types of 501c3s. So you have to be very careful about that. Jan is right about, she's right about everything, but she's right about one thing. It takes a lot of time, man. My wife told me for years, if you spent half the time composing pieces, your own compositions, as you do writing grants, your career would be like in a whole different place. Often when you're in an organization, even with the supposed delegation of duties, there's one person who gets stuck doing all the grant writing. And if you're a composer, I'm sorry, it's just fact. You have to know that that's going to overwhelm your composition time. So there's just like major pros and major cons. And also one thing that I've discovered the hard way is that a lot of grants require a ton of work and then you get $700. And it's like, so you have to really budget in advance. It's like, you can't just go like, oh, look, there's this grant, this grant, this grant, this grant, because some of them are just, I'm sorry, they're not worth it. You put in 20 hours of work for $500, and it's like, no. Also, I mean, you know, some of the resources that Jan listed, those are all amazing. Some of them, I think, I don't know, how can I say this in a politically correct way? Some of them are so competitive that, frankly, your chances are almost zero. And so that's also something that you have to sort of budget, and when you're determining what to apply for and what not. You know, some of these grant organizations get, you know, 10,000 applications. And if you're not super, super experienced or famous, or you're teamed up with someone who, the Jack Quartet, like New Music USA, you look through who actually gets the award. It's like Jack Quartet, Jack Quartet, Jack Quartet, Jack Quartet, Jack Quartet. If you can write a grant together with Jack Quartet, your odds of getting it are very high. I say that only half jokingly because, you know, you can have a super cool project that has all these community engagement elements, and you're teamed up with a no-name organization and a no-name ensemble. And the fact is that lowers your chances. So teaming up great ideas and thinking about issues and everything that Jan said, it does help to team up with, to partner with somebody who that ensemble or performer has a track record. Because if you and your three partners all have no track record, most of the grantor organizations, when they're looking at a stack that's 7 feet high, they're like, we're not, sorry. There are exceptions, and I'm sure that Stuart and Jan can you know, attest to that. But I'm also trying to put a little bit of the reality there. Yeah.
I think when you're, I mean, all that is very important and very true. And I think I would say that it took us a very long time to actually receive traction on like Amphion and Ditson and Copeland. And I mean, and we still get denied by Copeland. We've received grants from Copeland and still get denied. So that is very true and very important information to know that I mean, we have to be realistic about the amount of time we spend writing a grant versus the amount of time we spend as artists creating the art for the project. But I can tell you that if you start at the local level, if you start with your city arts council and your county arts council,
and your state even,
and you are a no-name group so far, but you have important community partnerships, you have much better chances of getting something there at that local and state level, of course, than on a national level. I mean, you're not going to be looking to put on something in Newark, New Jersey, you know, or that was maybe a bad example. Let's think of something not in that part of the world. Maybe you're putting on something in, you know, San Diego that no one is going to really see except for the people in that very particular community. You have much better chances of getting funding from that actual city and county than you do from the Amphion Foundation. That is definitely fact. So, you know, I think that's important. Thank you, Lansing, for giving us a dose of reality there, because it is really important to weigh these things as you're deciding, okay, is it better for me to solicit funding from communities myself? Or is it better to write a grant for such a thing? You really have to weigh the cost benefit thing, like how much money are they going to give me for all the work I'm going to put in? And, you know, it's sometimes it's good to work with like a fractured atlas or something like that, to not go through the trouble of becoming a 501, but rather to test it out with a fiscal sponsor.
I'll say one more thing, and then I'll let others speak. Elizabeth, I'm sure, has a lot to say too, because I've been blown away by her success as well. But I assume everyone in this Zoom is a member of SCI. If you are not a member of SCI, raise your hand, except don't raise your hand because I don't want to know. It's Society of Composers, Inc. There are lots of composer organizations out there, but it's probably the oldest. And it can be kind of fuddy-duddy, I mean, to be completely honest. But it's got a lot of great resources. And one of the cool things about it is that if your school, for example, has a student chapter, your student chapter, first of all, this is kind of related tangentially. Now, every concert that you, like every student concert that you present, you all qualify for royalties from BMI because it's an SCI event. But if you have a student chapter of SCI, you also can have 501(c)(3) status through the national organization. What? No. Do you all understand how much time you've just saved yourself? That is like immense. You can now apply for some of these grants that you couldn't otherwise because you're a SCI chapter. So I encourage you all to look into that.
Anybody else have other questions that they'd like to ask about either band frequency, our projects, how we fund our projects, how we develop our projects?
Oh, that whole thing, Stuart. I mean, I'm sure you could have gone for 45 more minutes. I was blown away. I had no idea you guys were doing all that, as well as just like super cool concerts of new music.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have something to say is we really need grant writers. There is not enough out there. And I honestly, personally, will probably stop writing grants myself because I can't do it all. And I'm looking to hire somebody, and I can't find somebody that's looking for 3 years. And, you know, I have been trying to hire somebody. I can't pay people.
We've tried similarly to have some help with that because, as Lansing said, it usually falls on one person. In this case, it falls on two. We are pretty equal, luckily, Jan and I, but it's still a lot of work for two people. And we've tried to source out some of this to some other artists and musicians around, and it's not a skill that everyone has. Probably no one has it until you start doing it. You know,
it's easy to find grant writers, but not ones that really know
music.
How to
Yeah.
talk about it. And you know, if that's something you want to specialize in, you could probably make bank, and you could work from anywhere in the world doing that.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not like we don't want to do it. We're too good for it. It's like we have programs to run. You know? And if we just had a grant writer that worked for several organizations, writing grants for them, you know, maybe like 3 or 4 you could work for. But I mean, it's a need. It's a real big need, and I won't be personally applying for grants right now anymore. I can't do it. So.
Yeah. Definitely takes a toll. Yeah. And larger organizations, orchestras and things like this, have multiple grant writers they find, you know, they're kind of on the payroll or whatever. So, you know, that it could be something that you do for smaller groups, you know, kind of starting out as music-specific grant writers, but that could burgeon into other possibilities just for income, kind of, you know, on the side, if you can write eloquently about music and understand projects and things like that. That could be a really good skill to have.
I've had 3 people in the recent past, you included, Elizabeth, ask me, like, do you have any recommendations of grant writers? Do you know anybody I can contact to write some grants for my organization? But you're one of 3 people who has asked me, like people who run big festivals and such. So it is definitely a skill that only certain people have. But, okay, Zach has
we have a question, yeah. So Zach's question, when you're looking for funding after determining how much money the project costs, how do you determine the rate of compensation for those involved? And how do you go about selling yourself in that way to grant givers?
Okay, so biggest piece of advice, sorry, Stuart, to cut you off, but like the biggest piece of advice in there, and I'll say it really simply, and then I'll let Stuart expand upon this, is never sell yourself short as an artist and go for the absolute highest amount possible using union scale wages from the get-go. And don't cut anything when it comes to artist funding, anything.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Now, so union, just find out what the union scale is in your town, You don't necessarily have to be a union member to do that, although it's good to be. Your performers should be. But yeah, we base all our costs for musicians on union scale. Now, as far as us administratively, we usually add, we come up with a like $3,000 number. I forget how we did that, based on the amount of time Jan and I average, how much time it takes on average to put a grant together. It doesn't mean we always get that $3,000, but that's kind of what we say, generally speaking, for average grants. Just what you can just say, okay, I'm going to spend 10 hours and I'm paying myself $50 an hour or whatever it is. Find some number. And then you put that in the grant. You put that for, grant writing, administrative costs, whatever.
That's not an unusual cost, and they will expect that. I mean, grants expect that there will be standard artistic fees, and you never sell that part short. If you have to cut something, you cut the entertainment, the refreshments at the concert or whatever, but never the artists.
Well, I will say though, again, going back to what Janet said earlier about some of the grant panels that review these things, if they're not being musicians, usually what we've encountered, the standard union rate for $125 per 2-hour rehearsal and $220 per performance. But that adds up when you have 5-6 players for three rehearsals each or whatever. Sometimes people find that very expensive compared to other to dance maybe and to actors or things like this. But as long as you outline it and you say this is what the musicians union has as a going rate, you justify it that way. You don't want to shortchange your players. So when Ben Frequency first started for the first year or two, we didn't pay anyone. Everyone, they were ASO players who just loved new music and wanted to play, right? But we didn't think that was sustainable. Like, we wanted, to be a professional group, you want to pay people what they're worth, or as close to as you can. And that's not to say we pay everyone 100% union fee all the time, but like that's what we shoot for in our grants, and we actually do pay them union scale. But for a few years, money, like during when Red Sneakers went under, the things were tough, right? So, but that's kind of our rule of thumb. And I think technically, Lansing, to your point there, we've tried that too. I think technically you can't, or we've been told, I don't know what the rule is, but you're not supposed to put in base a grant writer's fee on a percentage of the grant. Isn't that correct, Jen? Yeah. Anymore. It seems to make sense to do that, but we're told that that's unethical. And I forget, I don't know if it's illegal or not, but whatever. So I think it's better if you just come up with a fee. The problem is if you pay someone, $200 to write a grant and they're not successful, then you're at minus $200, right? Because you still have to pay them for their time. So it's really a tricky balancing act, I think.
I think for that problem, what I've done is I really have to be sure that that's a grant we can get.
Yeah.
And communicate with the grant people. Like,
yep.
We can get this actually has a chance and what looks good.
Yep.
And, all of that stuff.
Yep.
Can I ask you guys, like when you apply for some of these bigger ones, not the city, state, like the New Music USA ones, I've been told that after they sort of restructured, well, first of all, a composer and an ensemble will never get a grant just to like write a piece. Those days are over. Like, hey, we want to apply for a grant for just like ensemble X, commission a composer to write a piece. That's not happening. It's like it has to have an angle. It has to have a theme. It has to have something. But also, I've been told that they now really respond to slick produced applications. So for example, New Music USA, you upload a video. What if it's just you sitting in front of your laptop camera explaining your grant? So do you guys actually get into sort of production of, to pitch ideas that are really sort of engaging, sexy, you know what I mean?
We haven't. We've done some video. Like we've created clips of our season. I can't say that they were. I mean, we just put together, sort of a smattering of things that we've done in the past season to sort of show for things. But no, I think it's. We try to always have very clean applications and to have very. We think a lot about eliminating jargon, and we think a lot about writing things concisely so that it's really understandable, and more importantly, the true meaningful connections with these partnerships that we have. So now, from a production angle, I can't say that ours is particularly slick.
Costs money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and we're a small 501. We don't apply for those grants that are for organizations that bring in over $500,000 a year. We don't have an accountant that works for Bent Frequency. I mean, I'm the accountant, so we have to be careful that we're not spending more money to apply for a grant than the grant is actually worth. So even those large grants, like to your point, Lansing, is you never know what you're going to get from them. So I can't afford to spend $2,000 on some video that I might not even get $2,000 from the grant. So we just do our best ourselves, and we have tried to ride on the reputation that we have begun to grow.
Track record, yeah.
The track record of the success of our projects, and we try to keep real track of the impact of our projects, and that's what we have just ridden on. And I'll tell you, it's been try and try again with certain organizations where it literally did take us 7 years to actually crack through and get a grant from a certain organization. You're right about that. I mean, it takes a long time.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
It seems to me that they go hand in hand, somewhat calculating, a net worth or an estimated expense of keeping Bent Frequency or something like Bent Frequency in place. But then also as you grow Bent Frequency, I'm sure, have amassed quite a library, haven't you?
Yeah. You mean of videos and things and recordings?
Videos, recordings, scores, instruments.
The problem is with a lot of
networks of people, all of that. And as you do both of those things, I think you can quantify some sort of value for proposing grants, right? Like, what sort of value do you put into the audience, the communities that you interject into, but also your value as an ensemble, and I don't know if you ever turn over rates to an extent that you have excess and then are putting back in, whether new instruments or, a new printer or, a new calculator, because you're the accountant. But then you go as far as hiring somebody, like Lansing said, for grant proposals, or, an accountant, or even just a score librarian or something like that, those are employees that, have. It's so interesting to me, but they go hand in hand, and I guess, have you ever tried to calculate the net worth of Bent Frequency is the question I'm asking myself here, or would you say you have a positive neutral, or do you need to have such a strong backbone proposing these grants because you often get stiffed and you often find yourself with the negative? Yeah, I've very carefully, that's a good question, Andrew, I very carefully managed the finances of BF so that we have never operated at a deficit ever. No. We're very careful in how we write the grants and how we also solicit donations and things like that, so that we're very careful about always protecting our artists and our projects, but that we never
are like, oh my gosh, we didn't get that grant. Now we're on the hook and we have this project. And we were never in that situation. So, and we're able to reinvest back into the organization. But, it's always one of those things that if we don't have a good grant writing year, it impacts future programming. It's as plain and simple.
And I will say with these governmental grants, I think everyone expects in the arts, you never get what you need. No one ever really gets what they need, And so after we get awarded, if we apply for $10,000 and we get $7,000, we have the opportunity to reconnoiter the grant or the scope of the grant, right? So we might change, like if we were going to do a 10-person piece, then we might say, okay, well, we're going to try to find something that will fit into that slot, so we use fewer performers. Unfortunately, the local performers won't get that income. But if we don't have that money, then we have to kind of reconnoiter the program. So you have that option. We've never calculated the net worth of bend frequency. I don't think it would be really a worthwhile endeavor. I don't think we have that much. But
I'm too busy running a grant.
Yeah, but we have never, 501s, they are a business, so you can apply for loans and you can apply for credit cards. We opted to never do that because I think that's, in this line of work, that's not a good way to go about things, So we've never had any kind of negative.
I might manage bend frequencies, finances okay, but put a credit card in my hands, it would be all over.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how many, what have you seen an influx or an inflation in your success rate or just the amount of money that you've been able to acquire over the years? You've certainly seen a growth, and I'm saying tracking that could be helpful in projecting some sort of prospective productivity.
It could be. And I will say the last few years we've shifted more away from the project grants where you do a grant for a specific concert or for a specific thing, and now we're doing more operational funds for the entire season, so you have a little bit more flexibility with how that money is used, and it's usually a little bit more money. So we're doing more just general support for the year kind of situation, which is good because the flexibility allows you, and it supports more concerts, more
and it
activities.
allows us to raise funds for things like commissioning compositions, right? So that we're not applying just for composition commissioning grants, but that we have operating support where we can then do such a thing. Yeah.
And Lansing, I think you're right. I think the days of just getting a commission, it's gone, right? Just for a grant. I mean, you have to find donors, or you have to find other ways to do this, or it's. Yeah.
Which I think I am all for everything that you guys are doing, and everything that we're all of us, not just as composers but as a field, that we're all engaging with issues and community and all this. 100% behind that. But there's also something to be said. Think of like all the great pieces that just never have been written that were just pieces of music.
Yep. Of course.
I mean? Like not every, it's like, so I think it's kind of sad that we're in an era like, hey, who wants to commission you, Stravinsky, to just write some, chamber piece? What's it about? What's the community engagement? What's the social, it's like, well, you know what I mean? I think, I mean, a lot of my music, most of my music in the past decade is social engagement and justice and whatever, all these kind of things. But I also just write music that's just a piece of music.
Yeah.
I don't think every piece of music has to be, whatever.
We agree. And I don't want to, there are concerts that we do. There are concerts, it's not necessary. The general idea that I talked about in the serving underrepresented communities is still the guiding principle. But some concerts are just, okay, we have this amount, we have $2,000, we got to pay 4 people to play. Let's pick some music that works really well within this, and we are also, these projects allow us, like if there is money left over, or if we can leverage this money for donations, and we didn't really talk about that, but as a 501 we can receive donations, so that's the money we can use for commissioning from time to time, which isn't a whole lot, but that's what we do. So but you're right, I agree.
Yeah, we love music for music's sake, art for art's sake. We do. I mean, so it's a lot of the commissions that we make are not part of a project. Yep. They are commissions for a piece of music by a composer we really love. And we play the music, and sometimes we're able to put it together in part of a project that we create. And sometimes it's just a concert, you know? And so there's some really great things to organize in that way too. So,
but we found that if you're doing, again, just a concert, just kind of, I'm going to put a concert together, great. It's hard to find money for that. I mean, just from these organizations, these governmental grants, like you said, you have to have kind of an angle, and it's important to think about that, how you can work that into your art and your projects.
Yeah. I think we need to probably take a break at this point. We have another presentation that we need to give in a few moments, but to allow everyone a chance to stretch and whatever else. But we want to thank you all for your important feedback and questions and conversation about this topic, and for, just listening. And yeah, it's great to see your faces. And